I understand people going on the street today in Minneapolis, fighting this ICE, believing they're doing something noble. And that's exactly what happened to the Red Guards.
So in the Cultural Revolution, which you lived through, you saw that in real time.
When I was growing up, we were always told our goal is to liberate the humanity.
Xi Van Fleet is a survivor of Mao's Cultural Revolution and co-author of Made in America, the hidden history of how the US enabled communist China and created our greatest threat.
Because they never understood communism, they made all the possible mistakes and eventually helped the CCP to take over China.
From the founding of the CCP in 1921 to today, she breaks down how America aided the survival and rise of its greatest adversary.
CCP, or communism, is a snake. You can save it, you can help it, but it will bite you because it's nature. The nature is that it's going to destroy you.
This is American Thought Leaders, and I'm Yanya Kellick. Xi Van Fleet, such a pleasure to have you back on American Thought Leaders.
Thank you so much for having me back for the third time.
Well, and you always have incredibly important things to say, and congratulations on your new book, which I will also say is very important and kind of dovetails with the book that I have coming out as well, so I find it particularly poignant. You mentioned something in there that a lot of people don't understand, but I also covered. Totalitarianism is distinct from just your run-of-the-mill authoritarian dictatorship. How is it different?
Authoritarianism is, of course, dictatorship. They demand you do certain things and they demand that you obey. And mostly leave you alone, not totalitarianism. A demand not only you obey, but you have to believe in them. That means they have to control your mind. And it's like a religion. So I think that totalitarianism is more like a theocracy, like in Iran, like in China. They absolutely demand that you change your mind. That's called thought reform, and believe their lies. You have to believe. You can't even pretend you believe. They demand that. And that's my experience, my first 26 years experience in China. I think that's important to understand it. CCP and the people running Iran, they are totalitarianism.
This is something that was a huge lesson to me over the last 10 years, how powerful propaganda can be. That it will change the minds of people when it's pushed in so hard through the system. And so in the Cultural Revolution, which you lived through, you saw that in real time.
Yeah, and here too, I think I want people to realize wokeism is also totalitarian in nature because it demands that you believe. They demand you believe, not you can't just say, okay, women can be men, but you have to believe it. And they have been very successful in changing people's mind. So it is totalitarian in nature. So that's why the underlying link is communism, Marxism. I understand people going on the street today in Minneapolis, fighting this ICE, believing they're doing something noble. And that's exactly what happened to the Red Guards. You can't say they just totally just have no idea what they're doing. They believe in it. And same thing like here, those radical left, they thought it's something noble. And that's the power of indoctrination. I've seen that. I was one of them, even though I was not really Red Guard, I was too young. But I believed in the lies that I was told. I absolutely never doubt. I always believe that the party is always right. The party cannot be wrong. So what I do, believe in the party.
And just very briefly, for those that might be uninitiated, the Red Guard, tell me about who they were.
The Red Guards are the kids. Yeah, during the Cultural Revolution, Mao needed an army to carry out his revolution. They know nothing, and they can't think critically, and they do one thing really well, follow the order. So they did what Mao wanted them to do.
So let's go back now to, you did some really interesting research in your book. You're looking way back to even before the time where the Chinese Communist Party took power in 1949 in China, that already there were kind of American interests that were basically supporting it. I did not know about this. Tell me more.
This is I tried to do in my book, to trace all the way back to the beginning. And so, and it really started in the 1800, in the middle of 1800, when a lot of American missionaries or Western missionaries went to China to spread the gospel. At the same time, they also brought with them the idea of democracy, the idea of constitutional government. And it's their work actually fueled the revolution of 1911, which overthrew the Qing dynasty. And in 1912, created the republic. And it's called Republic of China, 1912. And they tried their best. It's imperfect. It's far from being perfect, but it tried to follow the model of America style government. And it failed, but it survived. And it's still here today. People don't think about it. It's still here today. Republic of China now is in Taiwan, transitioned to a full democracy. So that was the beginning. But what happened? China was on the way to become a really a possible or potential, if I say potential, to be a really a republic, and the Asians first, but it was derailed. And that part of the history is just astonishing. And who played that role to derail the whole potential? Woodrow Wilson.
Well, but we know, I mean, let's go before Woodrow Wilson got involved. I mean, the Soviet Comintern was a little bit involved in here. Okay, I mean, I say that glibly, right? But this was a project of the Soviet Union, right?
No, actually, it's the other way around. So the Western ideas came to China around the same time, in the early 1900s, late 1800, and early 1900. And the Enlightenment ideas of democracy, idea of freedom, and among them is also Marxism. But it did not make any traction. People are more drawn to the Western idea, and they call it Mr. De and Mr. Sai, meaning science and democracy. They believe that's what China needed, and that's what will save China and help China to modernize and to be independent from the foreign influence or control of the imperial West. And then something happened. After World War, and the foreign powers got together in Versailles, and that was the Paris peace talk. So China was very hopeful, thinking that they will get the land called the Shandong province back from the Germans. Instead, it went to Japan, and because people are just so hopeful that Woodrow Wilson will help them with their demand, with their rightly cause of getting their land back from Germany. It did not happen, and that turned everything just upside down overnight. The sentiment from pro-America to anti-America, that paved the way for the red tide to sweep through China. That gave the opening to the Russians to come to China, and eventually helped the radicals to form communist groups, and in 1921 officially founded the Communist Party.
One quick sec, we're going to take a break, and folks, we're going to be right back. And we're back with the author of Made in America, Xi Van Fleet. So now, of course, the Soviets came, they were doing their thing, but it didn't last that long in itself, right? Like basically the Mao and the Chinese took control of the Communist Party at some point pretty quickly, right?
That is a long history. Actually, I think probably it's better to read the book because it's a lot of history. Actually, the Russians not only took over the communists because they helped to found the communists, they also took control of the nationalists. And so because the leader of a nationalist party, Sun Yat-sen, who was considered the founder of a Chinese Republic, and so he was looking for help from the West, and no one, everyone turned their back to him. So eventually he said, I have to go to Russia. So because no one was willing to help us. And that at that time, actually, the dominant thought in America is isolationism. It's China, such a vast and a poor continent. Over there, it doesn't really matter to our national interests. It might be right, but they overlooked a very important factor. The Russians are ready to move in, and they did.
Explain to me how the nationalists were also somehow, co-opted by the Soviets alongside the Communist Party itself, which was fighting them.
So when the Soviet Union helped to found the Chinese Communist Party, it was very small. It was only 50 members. Guess who were the members? Do you think it's poor peasants or poor workers, the proletariat? No, they were intellectuals. Some professors of Beijing University and their students. They're very small. While nationalists, it's a mature party because they carried out the 1911 revolution that overthrew the Qing dynasty. So what they did is they helped the Nationalist Party, but there was a condition that you have to incorporate the communists. And so basically, their plan was that they let the communists be part of the nationalists and eventually take over from within. And they were almost successful until later the new leader of the nationalists, Chiang Kai-shek, realized the plan. They realized that the communists have been infiltrating the party from within and have been really converted so many nationalists into communists. So in 1927, he made the decision to purge them. And he killed like some 4,000 suspects because they did not know who was who. It was a very, very messy situation. So they killed 4,000, including communists and also some leftist nationalists. And that marked the split of these two. But for us to understand is that that's what Chinese communists do, or communists in general. They are parasites. They absolutely attach themselves to a bigger bigger political force, party or force, and then grow from within, and they are almost successful.
So the nationalists purge the communists, but we still end up getting the CCP taking over in 1949.
This story is so absolutely fascinating. So after the purge, and the CCP have to withdraw and went to mountains to become really bandits. That's what they are called, red bandits, and they started to expand and call themselves basically opposition government. And the Chiang Kai-shek was determined to get rid of them. So he tried 5 encirclement campaign and tried to wipe them out. And the 5th time, he was successful and drove the communists out of that area and started what now many people know, the Long March, to escape. And they went westward and eventually ended in northern China, a place called Yan'an. And so from there on, the fight continued, because by then the Japanese started its aggression against China, and totally by accident, also by national demand, they have to start another united front, work together, supposedly, to fight against Japanese. That turned out to be another disaster. And that turned out to be really the cooperation that ended nationalists. And eventually, after Civil War, drove them out of China to Taiwan. So twice they collaborated, and twice the nationalists were deceived and eventually defeated. And this period actually was a period that the Americans had a first-hand experience with the CCP. And CCP managed to deceive the Americans and managed to utilize the Americans to defeat their enemy, the nationalists. So the lesson absolutely was never learned, because after this, the same thing happened over and over and over until even today. And so this is why the book is so important, to help people to understand. We were there. When I say we, America was there, and they did not understand communism. And because they never understood communism, they made all the possible mistakes, and then helped the CCP to take over China.
But with the coming of Deng Xiaoping, as the story goes, right, suddenly to be rich is to be glorious. So, obviously China abandoned communism, right?
Well, then we have to go back a little bit to Nixon, don't you think? And so it was 1972, and I was in high school, that we learned Nixon was coming to China. We just could not believe. If Americans were shocked, we were, just imagine how shocked we were, because since childhood we're taught America is our deadly enemy, because America want to destroy us, and so we'll do everything to defend China against our enemy. And then you tell me President Nixon was going to visit us, and we just could not get our mind around it. And that was the height of the Cultural Revolution, when everything was in ruins, absolutely in ruins, and there's no economy, no jobs, no nothing. We live in extreme poverty. But CCP was saved by no other than the President of the United States, Richard Nixon. And Trump rightly called that was the biggest mistake he made. Yes, that is true. He saved CCP. He saved the CCP from the ruins.
Mm-hmm. How?
He opened China up, because China at that time was facing the absolute total collapse. And in the late 1950s, there was a big split between China and Soviet Union. and it gets worse. By the time of 1972, by the time that before Nixon visited China, the two powers were almost at the blink of nuclear war. Can you imagine? Mao was like a threat both internally, externally. Only this time it was his former boss, Soviet Union. And he needed help. He absolutely needed help. Sure enough, the help was on the way. And that was no other than the President of the United States, Richard Nixon.
You know, it's a really, this story, and I want to encourage people to read because you flesh out so many of these details and nuances of how this all happened. And, you know, you mentioned that we really failed to understand the true nature of the Chinese Communist Party, of Chinese communism. What is it that we don't understand?
Communism, we talk a little bit, it's a religion. And it's really want to remake the world in its own image. And not only that, it want to remake human nature. And so it cannot be peaceful because in order to do that, they have to use power and they have to use violence. When I was growing up, we were always told our goal is to liberate the humanity. So its goal is not just China and then maybe some other country. No, the entire world. That is the threat. You can treat it as friend, but it always treats you as its mortal enemy. And I did use this story in the book, The Farmer and the Snake. A lot of people probably know that story. CCP or communism is a snake. You can save it, you can help it, but it will bite you because it's nature. The nature is that it's going to destroy you.
Well, Xi Van Fleet, it's such a pleasure to have had you on.
Thank you so much, as usual.
Thank you all for joining Xi Van Fleet and me on this episode of American Thought Leaders. I'm your host, Jan Jekielek.